Hey everyone, this is Dave Glander with Reasons for Hope, and every now and again we'll have somebody watch one of our videos that we put out, and they will do a response to our video. And so what I want to do is I want to respond to the response. So let me introduce you to...
What's up, heathens? How ya doing? I'm the Godless Engineer. Today, we're going to be analyzing Reasons for Hope, attempting to prove reasonable doubt about radiometric dating. They claim the method can't give us reliable dates.
The first thing I gotta say is he stays on task. So thank you for doing that. Not many red herrings, really no rabbit trails. That's awesome. That makes this easier to do. But when you say reliable, I want to know what that means. So let's take a look at what he says.
These methods are reliably accurate within a certain margin of error. And the margins of error can change depending on the radioisotopes that are used.
Okay, so already we're starting off on a good point. He's admitting that these margins can change due to different settings. So let's take a look at what he's talking about.
First off, many scientists now regard the age of the Earth to be between 4.55 and 4.6 billion years old. Okay, so if this method is reliable and accurate, why the 50 million year discrepancy? That seems like a lot, but let's get into some details here and see what's going on.
Well, the 50 million years is a relatively small margin of error compared to the total time that we're talking about. It actually is only 1.1% of the total time that we're talking about.
So let's put that into terms which he's trying to say 1.1%. So I ran some basic math here. I ran some basic math. If you took out a $300,000 loan, right, and last year it was 4.9% interest rate, that would mean you would be paying $221,523 in interest rate, which is just astronomical. But moving on, now it's at 6.77%, up from 4.09 last year. That means on a 30-year loan, you would be paying $402,554 in interest. That's $181,031 difference. Tell me that small margins don't add up to a lot when I'm talking about taking $181,031 out of your pocket. That's a huge margin. So 50 million years, pretty sure that's a big deal.
Specific meteorites that have crashed into the surface of the Earth give us an excellent source for information.
Meteorites, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a great point of interest. So let's look at an article from the Science Direct. Okay, this is Science Direct, not a Christian source whatsoever. They say dating of meteorite falls using thermoluminescence application to Antarctic meteorites. Okay, that's the title to the thing. So let's see what they say. The date of meteorite may be estimated from its thermoluminescence. The TL in meteorite is primarily induced by cosmic ray irradiation in space, and once the meteorite is on Earth's surface, it is shielded from further cosmic ray irradiation. Under these circumstances, the TL will decay at a rate governed by the thermal stability of the TL and by the environmental temperature. The effective storage temperature of the Antarctic meteorites is unknown, but appears to be greater than the mean annual temperature of the region of the meteorite find. Only upper limits to the terrestrial ages can be calculated because the TL at the time of the fall to Earth is highly variable from sample to sample. That's from Earth and Planetary Science Letters, Volume 58, Issue 3, May 1982, pages 419 to 429. So we see from a secular source that the dating informations are variable. They don't stay the same. They are changing every single day.
What we can do is test some of the oldest zircon crystals that we have, and we can come up with a number of about 4.4 billion years old.
It's amazing that you bring up zircons. I'm actually glad you did, because there's a study done that shows that there's an amazing amount of helium trapped within zircon crystals. And when the uranium and thorium began to decay, they produce within the crystal lattice a helium element that should escape, because helium is one of the most slippery elements known to man. But there are elements of helium within the zircons which show us that they can't be that old.
The reason why uranium-lead dating is used on zircon crystals is because when zircon crystals form, they do not accept lead particles into their crystalline structure, but they readily accept and incorporate uranium atoms.
You're wrong. Here's why. To start, you're completely missing the point, and everything you think is actually at odds with reality when you look at the data.
ChemEurope.com, uranium-lead dating. We can assume that the entire lead content of the zircon is radiogenetic. Where this is not the case, a correction must be applied. Under conditions where the system has remained closed, and therefore no lead loss has occurred, loss leakage of lead from the sample will result in a discrepancy in the ages determined by each decay scheme. This effect is referred to as discordance. Zircon crystals with prolonged complex histories can thus contain zones of dramatically different ages, usually with the oldest and youngest zones formatting with the core and rim respectively of the crystal, and thus are said to demonstrate inherited characteristics.
Keep in mind that there's all kinds of scientific jargon on this topic, and so we'll just present a very straightforward, simplified version of the process.
I mean, it's just basic scientific terms, and you learn a lot of these terms in high school.
High school terminology? Let's look at an article based on the dating to see if you understand what this is saying. And remember, this is supposed to be high school terminology. This comes from some mathematical and geophysical considerations in radioisotope dating applications from Nuclear Technology, 2017, page 197. The rate of diffusion will vary based on the sample, what type of rock it is, the number of cracks, and amount of surface area, and so on. Hayes says, so, there's not a simple equation that can be applied to every circumstance. It's a pain in the neck, but it will make our estimates significantly more accurate, Hayes says. If we don't account for the differential mass diffusion, we really have no idea how accurate a radioisotope date actually is. It's worth noting that the issues raised here do not apply to carbon dating, which does not utilize isotopic radios. Okay? So, first of all, I'm not sure that many high schoolers are going to understand that. But what I got out of it is this. Let's go back to this one. If we don't account for differential mass diffusion, so are you accounting for differential mass diffusion in your argument? You have to account for that in order for us to know anything about it, and that technical data is going to say that it changes. That's what it means, it changes.
This section discusses a situation where you would use potassium-argon dating. This dating relies on the initial condition of molten rock consuming organic matter that contains a certain potassium isotope. And this isotope will eventually decay into stable argon gas atoms. Now, no argon would be trapped in this molten rock consuming organic matter because, of course, it's gaseous, the rock is hot, it's going to not get trapped inside of this lava flow.
Alright, your claim is that it can't get trapped in the lava flow, so let's take a look at an article that comes from New Mexico Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources. Because the K to AR, which is potassium to argon dating technique, relies on determining the absolute abundances of both 40 AR and potassium, there is not a reliable way to determine if the assumptions are valid. Argon loss and excess argon are two common problems that may cause erroneous ages to be determined. Excess argon, 40 ARE, can cause a calculated K to AR age to be older than the quote-unquote true age of the dated material. Excess argon may be derived from the mantle as bubbles trapped in a melt. In the case of the magma, or it could be a xenocrust or xenolith trap in the magma lava during emplacement. So what we see here, according to the scientific journal, is that it can trap argon within the magma, within the bubbles that are being formed in the magma. Interestingly enough, if we go over to the National Library of Medicine, we can find an article that says reversible loss of potassium effect in distilled water. And here's what they say. Potassium is lost by 80% with only 4.5 hours of distilled water being washed over the specimen. So my question to you is this. Is it possible that lava, during its cooling process, may have been contacted by water? Because if so, the potassium rate drops by 80% with only 4.5 hours, which would change the entire outcome of the study.
A lot of times at this point, some creationists might be like, well, we can date this rock that only formed like 50 years ago, and we'll come up with numbers that are in the millions of years or whatever. And creationists regularly misuse radiometric dating methods in order to prove that the radiometric dating methods don't work. Like for rocks that formed 50 years ago, you're not really going to be able to use a radiometric dating method like uranium-lead or potassium-argon because those particular dating methods are useful for older objects.
Do I look stupid to you?
Okay, now this one, I barely have words for it. I mean, come on, man. You already suggested earlier that there are different dating techniques. So let's look at another radiometric dating technique called carbon-14, and let's see if there's any validity to it. Because to say you can't date new rocks, I barely have words to explain how crazy that sounds.
I'm here at beautiful Mount St. Helens in Washington State. You know, just about 40 years ago, this mountain was cone-shaped. But as you can see, it's not like that anymore. Now it's got this horseshoe shape. That's because on May 18, 1980, this volcano blew its top. Literally. The top 1,300 feet of material blasted away, leaving this crater. Now eventually, lava flows formed a new dome. 5 new domes actually, all of which were destroyed by subsequent eruptions. But the 6th dome that formed between October 1980 and 86 is what you see today. It's composed of 2.6 billion cubic feet of lava, and it's quite young, having finished forming just over 30 years ago. Well, in 1996, geologists sent rocks from the lava dome to be radiometrically dated. Now, they used a method called Potassium-argon. If radiometric dating and the assumptions that it's founded on were accurate, well then Mount St. Helens rocks should have yielded very young ages. After all, the rock was merely about a decade old. You see, the problem is, they didn't. The rock gave an age of 350,000 years. When they dated the minerals within the rock, the problem got much worse. They gave dates of 2.4 million years. This is for a 10-year-old rock.
In order to get accurate rock dates, one would have to accurately know both the decay rate and the initial conditions of the rock sample, right? Since radioisotope dating uses both types of science, we can't directly measure the ages of rocks. There are assumptions involved.
Well, we do know the decay rates of all the isotopes that we use in radiometric dating methods. No, we don't. We also know the initial conditions of the parent and daughter element. No, we don't. Assumptions that are logically entailed by the physics of nature.
Assume. You make it.
See, man, you can't just say that we know these things because we don't. Honest scientists will admit we don't know that the decay rates have always been the same or what the initial condition was. And so I want to give you 2 examples. It's like this. If we knew what the decay rates were the entire time, it'd be like walking into a forest and watching a guy cut down trees. Now, you observe that he cuts down 1 tree per hour, so you can look and say he's cut down 30 trees, he's been here for 30 hours. But what you do is you go and you have a conversation with him, and he tells you that at the beginning of the process, he was cutting down 3 or 4 trees per hour because his axe was much sharper, and he wasn't as tired as he was now. So the rate of cutting changed, but you didn't know that until you asked. And if you just assumed that he was cutting down 1 per hour, then you would come up with 30 hours, but it really wasn't. It was much shorter time than that. Or let's say you walk up to a pool and you see a big hose that's dumping water into a pool, and you assume that you watch it and it's dumping 1 gallon per hour into the pool, and so you're trying to observe how long it took to fill the pool. And so you would come up with a calculation, but then the lady comes over and says, hey, how are you doing? And you have a conversation. She says, well, I've only been filling the pool for about an hour because the pool was mostly full, plus it rained, filling the pool even more. So you didn't know the initial amount of water that was in the pool any more than you knew the initial amount of trees that he was cutting down at that time. It's the same thing with decay rates, if we're being honest.
I mean, if Reasons for Hope can prove that there's actually a variable decay rate for radioisotopes, then by all means, write a paper, submit it to an academic institution, get it published, and then you'll probably win a Nobel Prize. Because that would have sweeping ramifications for the scientific world.
I sure hope someone won a Nobel Prize based on your suggestion, because we don't have to write a paper. You know why? There are dozens of them. If you just open up this thing, it's called Google. And you Google it, you're going to find, let me just show you a few of them just to kind of make the point. This one's coming from phys.org. Radiocarbon dating only works half the time. We may have found the solution. Yay! How about this one from study.com? Why is radiometric dating not accurate for sedimentary rocks? How about one from Science Daily? Inaccuracies in radiocarbon dating. Okay, I realize I might be picking on carbon-14 dating a little bit, and you were more focused on like radioisotopes. So let's shift a little bit and find those articles.
But wait, there's more.
All right, we're back to Science Daily. How about this one? Paper spotlights key flaw in widely used radioisotope dating technique.
Coming to us all the way from Nuclear Technology magazine, some mathematical and geophysical considerations in radioisotope dating applications. How about scientific reports? They say, Fluctuations in measured radioactive decay rates inside a modified Faraday cage. Correlations with space weather. So apparently space weather can affect radioisotope dating. Purdue. That's some smart people. What do they say? Purdue-Stanford team finds radioactive decay rates vary with the sun's rotation. So even the sun's rotation can affect decay rates in radioisotopes. From Forbes magazine, here's what they say. Radioactive decay rates may not be constant after all. Here's one from Cornell University. Here's what they say. Anomalies in radioactive decay rates, a bibliography of measurements and theory. How about MIT? Pretty smart folks over there. Do nuclear decay rates depend on temperature? How about New Scientist? Half-life heresy. Accelerating radioactive decay.
I hope somebody's getting a Nobel Prize from these. This is from The Atlantic. Maybe radioactive decay rates aren't physical constants. Here is APS Physics. Here's what they say. Test of nuclear decay rate variation due to anti-neutrino flux. I'm not really even sure what that is, but it should be a high school term, so maybe the high schoolers can figure out what anti-neutrino flux is.
Sadly enough, most creationists can only publish through other creationist journals and like that. That's because it wouldn't pass muster at real academic institutions and publications.
You serious?
Just for the record, I haven't quoted a single Christian source, except for the Mount St. Helens video, which is pretty cool. I haven't quoted a single Christian source. But here's the thing. I thought we couldn't be like, bigoted, intolerant. And what you're doing is you're throwing away Christian intelligence with these people who are geologists, PhD geologists. Like, these are smart folks. Well, they're Christians, so they can't be right. What kind of logic is that? That seems like you're being intolerant and bigoted, if I'm being honest.
Because we may have failed to consider some major assumptions, like, was there any sand at the bottom when the hourglass was turned over? Has any sand been added or taken out of the hourglass? Has the sand always been falling at a constant rate? Since we did not observe the initial conditions when the hourglass started, and we haven't been watching the sand all the time since then, we must make assumptions.
Basically, we don't know if someone has tampered with the sample. That is something that we need to control for. And there are ways to determine whether or not a sample was tampered with. Steps are indeed taken in order to protect the samples from either accidental or purposeful exposure. Any lab out there that's processing these samples, if they want to be taken seriously, are gonna try to control for any exposure of these samples to the elements.
Dude, I don't think he got the point to that one whatsoever. He wasn't talking about, like, laboratory workers or labs. We're talking about, like, geophysical processes through the supposed billions of years that you're saying that weather would affect it, and sun would affect it, and water would affect it, and atmospheric pressure, and all those different things. I don't even think you understood the point of the argument, so...
Last call for the bus!
So basically, I'm just pointing out that all of his concerns have already been addressed.
When? Where? How? Why? I'm left with so many questions. None of the questions were answered in your argument. Instead, what I've done was I've challenged your position. Hey, look, here's the thing, man. Neither one of us were there. And I know you hate that argument, but seriously, neither one of us were there. And I've just poked holes in your theory all day long as much as you were trying to poke holes in ours. But I want you to at least understand that I feel like it takes as much faith for you, honestly, more faith for you than it does for me to simply believe that God created in 6 days and on the seventh day he rested, versus the argument that you're trying to make for a scientific 4.5 plus minus for the age of the earth. And listen, I'm the opposite of you. I was an atheist for the first 30 years of my life until I picked up Christian worldview and understood Christian worldview is the only thing that properly explains anything, really. And so I want to challenge you. I know you said you were a Christian before and now you're an atheist. Take it from somebody who was an atheist for 30 years. I've probably been an atheist longer than you have, but I actually researched the truth and came to the conclusion that, man, the only thing that matters is the Christian worldview. It's the only thing that makes sense. Thank you for responding to this video. It's what we long for. We want to keep that continuation of the conversation going. So if you have a response to my response to your response, I'm out of, anyways, then feel free. And if you want my phone number, reach out to us, man. Maybe we can just talk. Have a great day, my friend. Be blessed.